Welcome and thank you for joining us. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis. On the program today, we're going to be talking about a very interesting cure for asthma. Well, actually, it's kind of a cure for a lot of different things. It's simply called the Holistic and Drug-Free Buteyko Breathing Method. On the program today is the co-founder of the Buteyko Center in the United States, Mr. Thomas Yakovlev-Fredericksen, who's going to be telling us what the Buteyko method of breathing is. Thomas, thank you for joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program.
You're very welcome, Daniel. It's a pleasure to be here with you today.
How did you come across this Buteyko method? What is it exactly?
Well, how I came across it, or what is the Buteyko method? There's two questions there. But
I like asking two questions in one breath.
I like that too. That's well done. Well, basically, the shortest story I can tell you is I'm 57. And in my 20s, I had Legionnaire's disease, which beat up my lungs. So having breathing difficulties and asthma problems and such and managing them through my life from that point was kind of no big deal. I got better. I got worse. About 5 years ago, everything came back up for me again with that, and I got extremely bad. And I ended up on every medicine in the book plus, and I was getting worse. You know, candidly, I've got to admit that if the route of medication, although that's completely against where I'm at holistically, right? If it would have worked, I probably would have done it, and I probably would have accepted it. But fortunately, it did not. Now, my wife, Sasha, is Russian by birth and also a well-known journalist and started Inward Path, the first alternate medicine in Russia, a huge center in Moscow right after Perestroika. And out of desperation, we had learned a little bit about the Buteyko method. And Sasha contacted Klinika Buteyko in Moscow and spoke with Ludmila Dmitri Buteyko, the elder widow of Konstantin Buteyko, the inventor. And when my wife tentatively said, "Can you possibly help my husband?" this elder said, "Of course, we can cure him." Well, come on, what do you mean? There's no cure for asthma. In fact, I've been told that a great deal. And as we talked and as we understood it and what we had studied, plus out of desperation, we went to Moscow. Within 2 weeks, I was symptom-free, and within about a month, I was off my medication. And what's so astounding about what Buteyko did is he discovered the cause, and the cause for not only asthma but hypertension, which was his personal health challenge, and an array of other illnesses. In fact, Buteyko would say there is one disease and many symptoms. Mm-hmm. And he spoke of chronic hyperventilation or overbreathing. And what happens is when you overbreathe, you lose what Buteyko called the angel's wing over the body. I just love that term, right? Carbon dioxide. Mm-hmm. Now, a little chemistry lesson is for oxygen to release out of your blood, there needs to be a molecule of carbon dioxide. If you overbreathe, you lose that carbon dioxide. And to use great medical terms, the body freaks out. And one of the ways the body freaks out is a bronchospasm. So the asthma attack is an attempt of the body to stop the loss of carbon dioxide, which literally means if you retrain your breathing, you can lose that symptom. And Buteyko had chronic malignant hypertension, and even though he was a genius student and at this point a medical doctor working in the largest hospital in Moscow, he could not get control of it with medication. And he had the eureka moment when he looked at his body breathing and how heavily he was breathing, how he was hyperventilating. And he had that eureka moment of asking which came first, the hypertension or the hyperventilation. He reduced his breathing and lowered his blood pressure, decreased his migraine. And he literally within minutes was on the ward of the hospital where asthmatics were and told them and taught them how to breathe less, and they lost the symptom. And it's astounding.
Well, it sounds that way, as you were saying, that he believed in, basically one symptom, if you will, or one disease.
Right.
Would it just be attributed to breathing?
Yes.
Really?
Yes, but see, that's the beauty. Because if you get the concept that we're overbreathing, Lao Tzu in the 5th century said the perfect man breathes as if he's not breathing at all. The samurai would place a feather under their nose and make it not move. I'm a student of Tibetan Buddhism, and one of my original teachers would teach an advanced, one of the higher levels of Tibetan Buddhist practice is called Shinei, which is a reduced breathing. And that balances the physiology of the body. But the way most of us breathe, let alone the other stimulus in our lives, right? We've triggered the fight or flight from the moment the alarm goes off. And if you've ever exercised and gotten dizzy, that's the Bohr effect, the Virigo Bohr effect. And that's this amazing concept that if you breathe more, you get less oxygen.
Oh.
And, yeah, dig that. So now when the body realizes that there's not enough carbon dioxide, it will do anything. It will create sleep apnea, where it stops the body until the carbon dioxide raises up. It will tighten bronchospasm. It will create mucus. Right? We're humans, right? It will create mucus. It'll create a bronchospasm, and it also will increase blood pressure. So Buteyko said asthmatics were lucky. It took me a while to wrap my head around that. And the point he made was an asthmatic has this immediate response that they've immediately got to do something about. Everyone else has high blood pressure. Everyone else has hypertension. Everyone else even has cholesterol. Buteyko lowered cholesterol levels by taking the body out of the physiological train wreck of being out of balance by the chronic hyperventilation.
Oh.
Great stuff, isn't it?
Well, it is. I was just thinking, for instance, hiccups are something people get, and it seems there's 1,000 cures out there. Most of them don't work. But one of the things that I started doing was kind of realizing, well, maybe, and this was just in my own way of thinking, is that the hiccup continues because of a reflex action in the diaphragm. So when you're talking, for instance, about Chinese philosophy, if you will, or even history, as I started doing the deep not chest breathing, but deep abdominal breathing, and I'd bring the breath down onto the diaphragm itself, and I would start exercising it while holding it at the same time on the diaphragm to just relax it. And that works for me 100% of the time. It actually works. And you're not breathing, as you're saying. You're actually bringing in breath, you're bringing it onto the diaphragm itself and sort of massaging it with the breath without exhaling. And it works very, very well. So I can see where a lot of this just makes a lot of sense.
Well, you're right. And, of course, your level of sensitivity to your breathing is extraordinary. What Buteyko would say to anyone he would speak to, and he was a genius inventor, and he wasn't, really that much of a PR kind of person, right? What he would say is chronic hyperventilation is the cause of disease. And if people seem to even get that concept at all, he would say, are you sensitive to your breathing? And if someone said yes, he would say, okay, now reduce it. And if someone said how, he'd walk away and have someone else of his staff work with him.
Oh.
So you've experienced hyperventilation from athletics. You've experienced it from emotional upset. You've experienced it in different situations where it triggers. And, once that goes, you've kicked the fight or flight. Now we fire the adrenals. Now we're going to hyperventilate. Now with the fight or flight going, we go right into that modality, right? So it's like an explosion of light or something. Part of the beauty of the Buteyko method is you change that. And when I first learned about Ludmila Buteyko, one of the things I learned was that she could stop an asthma attack on the telephone. And I thought, how do you even do that? And then I've got to admit, about 8 months later, I spoke with a man who called in to our office in Miami, suffocating, waiting for an ambulance. And with what I was able to explain to him, they canceled the ambulance, and he stopped what was going on. So it is astounding. Buteyko reduced the impact of radiation at Chernobyl immediately after the nuclear disaster. And there's clinical studies on that. My wife, Sasha, flew to Moscow last Monday, and she is with Andrei Novozilov today, just about now, and also Ludmila Buteyko, bringing that information translating it, and then we're going to release it. And it makes sense. See, this is the cool thing about Buteyko. If you can accept the concept that there might be an imbalance, and if you can change that imbalance and feel it, and noticeably feel better clarity, lose symptoms of illness, it's very, very simple, and then you get it. And that's our medical consultant is a man named Dr. Ira Packman, and he is the head of the board of malpractice for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And he was internal medicine for 40 years before he went to work for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. He's also an asthmatic and had been my physician. And as I changed my health so dramatically, then Ira did, and then he joined us with what we're doing here in the United States. And what Ira Packman said that's so fascinating is he compares Buteyko to Einstein. Oh. He said it rewrites the book. And it literally, we have seen, Buteyko had a list of 130 illnesses that he said the method by balancing the breath would correct. And we have seen so many cases where someone's taking our primary course either in person or through Skype, because we teach all around the world. If there's a husband and wife, of course, at our age, at anybody's age, but there's certainly middle age or whatever, they're going to be health issues. So David Wiebe, for example, who was written up by Jane Brody, the science editor of the New York Times, his wife Sue had some imbalances related to thyroid and some arthritic conditions and some other, issues that were going on for her. And she learned the method to back up David, and she changed her health. And my wife at 45 years old had extraordinary difficulty with arthritis and also kidney problems. And as the whole inflamed system goes back into balance, the body corrects itself, and then the body is strong enough that the immune system is strong. Because that little chemical train wreck of not enough carbon dioxide that creates oxygen deprivation throughout the body, that affects the body everywhere. So the kidneys, and it's of course it's in a fight or flight, it's in a panic, it's deprived. Now the kidneys, for example, lose potassium, magnesium, and bicarbonate. And as that is released inappropriately, and by the way, you need that for ADP and ATP, cellular energy. As those elements are lost, it needs to do some chemical bonding of its own to get out of there. So it taps the iron out of the system. So this is spectacular stuff, if I say so myself. And we are totally immersed in it, and we see the most amazing results because people get it, and kids get it even quicker.
Now, Thomas, here's something really interesting as I'm listening to you. About 2 years ago, we started talking with an author who does a lot of research on cancer. In fact, he has a book out there called The Hidden Story of Cancer. And what's really fascinating is that you see all this time and energy and all this money being raised for cancer research. And the sad part is they're not any further along now than they were 50 years ago, in my opinion. But yet millions, even billions of dollars, race for the cure, this, that, and the other. And here's what was really interesting is, so a couple of years, just about a year after that, I guess, we actually had Suzanne Summers on our program, which she put out a book called Breakthrough, which was alternative cures for cancer. And what was funny was, as I said, well, there's already been a cure for cancer, and she was surprised by me saying that. I said, well, yeah, it was actually cured back in the early part of the 1900s. And the basic cure for cancer was the fact that you needed to get oxygen into the cells, that was really one of the biggest, if not the number one reason that people get cancer in the first place is you just can't properly oxygenate your cells. Tell us how this Buteyko method can really fit into a paradigm like that.
Well, it's called the Verigo-Bohr effect. And you've got to get this one point. If you get this, then the whole thing makes sense. If you accept his premise that we are over-breathing, and if you accept what is called the Verigo-Bohr effect, the fact that when you over-breathe, you lose carbon dioxide and the oxygen, and you get less oxygen. The oxygen gets stuck in the hemoglobin. It's not released. So, therefore, in a generic sense, when you change the breathing, you change that, you increase the oxygen. And you'll feel that, and you can tell that, and you sleep better, and you're calmer, and it rejuvenates your body spectacularly. Now, what impacts so many people, I believe it's 17 million people are asthmatic in the United States right now, and so many kids, is that the bronchospasm, what we call an asthma attack, Buteyko proved it to be a reaction of the body to the shortage of carbon dioxide. It's trying to stop you from overbreathing. In fact, remember you used to breathe into a paper bag.
Right.
If someone had an anxiety attack, guess what? You're raising the carbon dioxide level. You're calming the body. You're shutting off the fight or flight. Because, of course, have an asthma attack, your fight or flight's triggered. You're suffocating, right? So these two things go together in a terrible, terrible way. Now, medicine, which is very helpful to many people in many situations, and we educate people on the method and on how to change symptoms, and then from there you and your doc can decide, when and where to go with medicine, right? Mm-hmm. The really wonderful thing about this is that the medicine is treating a symptom. It's releasing the bronchospasm, right? It's opening up your breathing, but guess what? Isn't the body doing that on purpose to save itself? Right. That's why people use more and more medication. Medication gets stronger and stronger. Buteyko gets the cause, and that's literally training how to rebreathe and how to breathe differently. I don't mean like rebirthing, and how to breathe more gently. And Buteyko, like anyone with an alternate approach, had his adversaries, and his laboratory was destroyed in 1963. Now, prior to that, if you see a picture of his laboratory, to me it looks like a movie set from Frankenstein. Every possible tube and wire and machine in the world is there. Because at that time, he had an unlimited budget and an unlimited staff through the Soviet government. And his laboratory was destroyed. And the beauty of that, though, was he developed a very simple way that any of us can measure the extent to how much we're overbreathing. That you can observe it, that you can tell it, that you can check it. In fact, we've got a self-test on the website, Buteyko Center USA, that physically, shows you, takes you through the steps of how to do this. And if you submit that information, then part of, one of our staff will evaluate it for you and help you understand a little bit better also, if you'd like. Now, that unique contribution of Buteyko, which he called a control pause, it's a measurement that you do, makes it possible for anyone to know where they're at, to tell if they're breathing properly, to tell if anything they're trying is benefit them or being a deficit, and how the different breathing exercises that we teach are impacting you. And it's great. I mean, I went from not being able to walk from a guest cottage on our property here in Woodstock, up above Woodstock, not being able to walk from a guest cottage to the main house, and allergic to everything, and on every medication, and still an invalid. It's not. It didn't even work for me. I went from that to now we do a 4-hour hike at Lake Minnewaska, which is near us, which is basically 2 hours up a mountain and 2 hours down it in the winter, year-round. You name it, on a Sunday afternoon, we're there, unless for some reason we're out of the country or in Moscow at the clinic. It's another life. It's another world. I am asthma-free. It would be a total piece of my past if Sasha and I hadn't decided how extraordinary this was, and Ludmila Dmitry Buteyko and Dr. Noble Zilov, her son, the medical director, who was Buteyko's stepson from the age of 9, asked us to formally represent them. Because it's a complex method. It's not as easy as watching a couple of things on the Internet and giving something a try. And often I'm on television shows and I'm asked, okay, teach us how to do it. And before I'll do that interview, I'll say, I'm not teaching this. If you do it incorrectly, you create what you're trying to get away from. On the other hand, we have everything from downloads to home study education to our primary course, Buteyko Method and Lifestyle, that we do through Skype. We even have a scholarship program which will have us gift the educational material to someone who is willing to say, I know that's inexpensive, but I can't do that. So, this is just astounding. And I had met a man a couple of years ago that I knew worked in an orphanage in Chernobyl, and I had heard his story that he was there. And I had heard the tragic story that the children did not survive and they weren't able to get the kids out. And I'm meeting this man now this many years later. And it impacted me, but it didn't even touch me until I saw what happened in Japan. So we've immediately gone to get those clinical studies and to get that information. And the beauty of the method is, if you do it properly, it's generic. It is something that you approach the major imbalance of the body, be it high blood pressure or asthma, breathing-related difficulties. Actually, a number of imbalances are very positively impacted by the method. But you go after that, it's like a pendulum that's been swinging crazy, and it goes right back into place, and you will feel it. And, I need to let you ask me questions because I am just an amazed advocate. My academics I have postmaster's degrees in counseling psychology from the Johns Hopkins, so I've got about 5 years of graduate school on top of undergrad, and my training in one sense is extremely traditional. And then, as we all have been blessed to do, I've been tuning into what's considered alternate, health for 25, 30 years. This is the most powerful modality I've ever seen.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the thing that's really wonderful about this day and age, because we all have such access to information where it's not blocked like it used to be, is that we can actually find alternatives from, doing drugs, having to take steroids, whatever the the case is, that we get to do more naturally what the body's able to do. It's amazing, just what a miracle the body is and its ability to heal itself now. But here was something I found interesting in this workbook that we have, which is the Holistic and Drug-Free Buteyko Breathing Method. Is now, this is in the preface, and perhaps you can help me understand this. It says here, 200 years ago, asthma was considered a mild ailment. Having asthma generally meant that a long life free of other diseases, but no one could explain how these people lived longer than others. Okay, so asthma is a bad thing, but in this case, it seemed to be a good thing.
Well, see, that's why Buteyko said that asthmatics were lucky. They had an extremely sensitive first line of defense.
Okay.
That when the body went out of balance, it said, wait a minute. So 100 years ago, an asthmatic was considered peaked or weakly, but they would live much, much longer than everyone else, and they would not have other diseases. And what Buteyko said, the cause of that is they were forced into a behavior that was reduced breathing. We tell kids, breathe like a little mouse. And Buteyko would say, inhale through your mouth as often as you eat through your nose. Of course, we're all running through life taking another deep breath right through our mouth and carrying right on. Gee, I wonder why I'm keyed up.
Exactly.
I wonder why things seem like they're at a fast pace. Because the breathing itself triggers the fight or flight. So there's the other interesting aspect to this. My original work as a psychologist was in anxiety and phobia reduction. And this is so extraordinarily powerful. And there is a lightness. Most people with breathing difficulties have an extraordinary heaviness in their chest. And then there's medications which now, unfortunately, people do lose their life to asthma. And unfortunately, the extent of the caliber of the medication at this point, it still has side effects that, in fact, are pretty profound and can even increase the chance of asthma-induced death, as the advertisements say on their disclaimers. This is so natural, and it's so easy, and you go with the symptom. So the moment you understand it, and some of my absolute best students are the asthmatics, because, wow, you can breathe. Wait a minute, I'm not having an asthma attack, and I'm not being forced to use a medication. And those medications, the rescue inhaler, is very specific about how many times a day to use it in a maximum 24 hours. Guess what? When you can't breathe, you use that thing. You might use it a couple of more times. Now, tragically, I mean, I can't tell you, Daniel, how many times people have said, my uncle, my aunt, my neighbor, my friend, my grandfather died of an asthma attack. And then their next statement is, we found them with their rescue inhaler. Unfortunately, those medications create a tachycardia, create increased heart rate if it's overused.
Right.
So, we haven't even talked about steroids, which have so many other effects on the body. So the beauty of this is if you're on medication, you don't stop it. But guess what? What if you lose the asthma attack? What if the hypertension lowers? What naturally occurs? And we've had an interesting response from physicians that were not aware of us and were not aware of the Buteyko method taught properly, which it has not always been done. Many people using the name without the authorization of the patent holders, Clinical Buteyko in Moscow. And what so often happens is the physician that knows nothing about us sees their patient is better. And as Dr. Packman said, we know it's the current modalities aren't working. He said, as physicians, we used to give out a prescription for 3 refills, see you in 3 months. Well, you know what? Nobody got better. They got worse. And they had to invent stronger medicine. Because when you treat that bronchospasm and treat the symptom, you don't solve the cause, which can literally be created by an awareness of your breath and retraining that breathing pattern. Now, that can take a while for some people, and when you describe your level of sensitivity, that's spectacular. I'm my heart is gladdened for being clear on how aware you are of your breathing. And I would say if you did the self-test on the website, it'd be interesting to see if you yet are over-breathing. I am, to be redundant, totally amazed, and to see the differences, particularly for breathing difficulties. But then from there, one of our students is one of our teachers, Mike Goslin, who went from medication. He's 54 years old. He was on medication from when he was 4 to being totally off medication and totally in control of it and extraordinary health. His sister-in-law, Irma Maltos from New York City, had Parkinson's. And in reading over the Buteyko material, Buteyko said this will help balance neurological difficulties. Well, Irma and her husband Art chose to come up from New York City and work with me, and I said, you know what, let's just see. This was so interesting, and any way that I could be a benefit to this person, I did. And Irma started practicing the exercises that I taught her. She had had heinous nightmares as a side effect of the Parkinson's and the medication she took to sleep. And so bad that she would be up the rest of the night, and anyone else who was in that house probably would be also. And she lost those immediately. And she was able to get from having difficulty moving to, they literally reached me from a cruise ship on their way to Puerto Rico as they're jogging around a deck. She went down to 1/3 of her medication and greatly reduced her tremors. And Michael Fox was being interviewed by Sanjay Gupta, and Sanjay Gupta was asking him about how he felt and when it was better or when it was harder. And Michael said, well, when I'm quieter and I don't speak a lot, if I'm real quiet, then it doesn't seem as bad. And then I immediately saw how he was breathing, and he was hyperventilating. Now, so many of us have done it for so long, it's the norm. In fact, it's even kind of a power source because we're triggering the adrenals. Mm-hmm. However, that's not meant to be done all the time. That's not meant to be long term. And that amazing experience Buteyko had of catching it. So we know about chronic hyperventilation. That's been around for a long time. And the Virago-Bohr effect goes back a couple hundred years when they realized, wow, not enough carbon dioxide, of all things, and you don't get enough oxygen. Mm-hmm. So this is known. But how he put it together and then took something so magical, really, and made it so simple. Mm-hmm. If he could say 2 words, he would say, breathe less. Say, breathe like a little mouse. And there's a series of different exercises you can learn out of the book that you have right there, or we have download CDs, a home study course, all kinds of stuff. Go onto the website and look at all that. There's ways that you can learn this method, and your life changes. And I have some of the most healthiest people I've ever seen learn the method and improve their health. And Buteyko himself was in extraordinary health. And I have had the honor of meeting some elders, I'll say in the 90s as elders. And these were Buteyko's cohorts and colleagues that are still alive. And they are so energetic, and they are so strong, and they look like extremely healthy wizards, and the women are just vibrant. And Lyudmila Buteyko herself was dying from asthma when she was 29 years old, and she had 3 clinical deaths. And when the ambulance travels in Russia, there's a physician with it. And so she had survived those, but her 9-year-old boy, Andre, would beat on the doors of the apartment building, literally, saying, "Who can help my mother?" They found an article about Buteyko, and they wrote him at his institute. And at that time, he said he got 200 letters a day. He found their letter, and the next time he went to Moscow, he went to their home. Lyudmila was too delirious, was too sick. She was 100 pounds overweight. She was on steroids. She also had been diagnosed with breast cancer, and she was on every form of asthma medicine there could be. So she was literally out of her mind. She could not understand Buteyko enough for him to communicate with her. He said, "Who else is here?" And the 9-year-old boy came out, and he taught the 9-year-old boy how to do the method. And he said, "Your mother's life is in your hands." And as Andre, who is now 52 and the medical director of the clinic of Buteyko in Moscow, as Andre says, and I'm with him on this. I mean, we spend a lot of time together. I'm fortunate to have that experience. And what Andre will say is, "So I gently taught my mother over 2 weeks, and she lost her symptoms." She went to her oncologist about 2 months later, and he said, what are you doing? Because she's off the medication. She's dropping weight. She's doing much better. She said, "Well, I'm using the Buteyko method with my asthma." And he said, "Well, you also have a spontaneous remission. So whatever you are doing, keep doing it." She became kind of a folk healer, and that doctor sent people to her because her results were so amazing. About a month later, the ambulance crew stopped to pay their respects to the family, assuming they had not been called. The woman must have finally passed away. And when they saw her, they were amazed, and so they started referring people to Lyudmila Buteyko, or Lyudmila Dmitri. She was not Buteyko then. And this is a very natural kind of thing in some communities to do, right, and the healers that are amongst us. And about a year later, she saw an advertising that Buteyko was lecturing at a medical school, and she tracked him down beforehand, and he was amazed she was even alive. And he said, "Are you back to work?" Because at that time in Russia, everyone had a job who could work. She said, "No, I'm teaching your method." And he quite angrily said, "How do you know you're doing it properly? Because if you do it wrong, you create what you're trying to get away from. You need to learn this properly." And she said, "Well, I'm not sure I have endless questions." Now, I'm a romantic, so my favorite part of the story is when elder Lyudmila, whose age I will not say, tells the story, and she smiles, and she has so much chi, and she has so much energy. She's like some elder Aikido master or something, right? And she'll say, "On the way to the lecture, I realized Konstantin Pavlovich Buteyko was interested in me as a woman. They married. Andre was raised by Buteyko. He went on to medical school, and Lyudmila worked with Konstantin for 36 years until he passed away."
Now, Thomas, if you can, I know there's a lot of stories, but we don't have the time for that. Could you please give out a website people can find out more about this?
Absolutely. It's www.buteykocenterusa.com, and the trick word is Buteyko, Buteyko. So it's buteykocenterusa.com.
Thomas, thank you for joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program.
Daniel, thank you so much.
You bet. We also want to thank you, the listening audience, for tuning in. Be sure to visit us at our website at beyond50radio.com. Sign up for our free weekly e-newsletter as well. I'm Daniel Davis. Thank you for tuning in. This is the Beyond 50 radio program, and remember, live your day past halfway.